Have you ever noticed that your relationships always seem to crash and burn in the exact same way? No matter how many times you try, no matter how different the new boyfriend or girlfriend seems at the start, at some point down the road, you look at them and you see your father staring right back at you, or your mother, and you feel that same old ache, that same familiar pain, the one you swore you would never, ever feel again. This isn't just coincidence. This isn't some cosmic joke. Carl Jung, the legendary Swiss psychiatrist, discovered something deeply disturbing about how we choose our partners. Something that chillingly explains why you keep attracting the exact kind of person who ends up hurting you the most. What I'm about to reveal could completely change the way you understand every relationship you've ever had. Let me start with a story. Ashley was 34 years old when she first walked into the office of a Jungian therapist. She was on her third marriage. The third marriage that was falling apart at the seams. And this time, she could no longer pretend it was just bad luck. Her first husband was emotionally unavailable. A workaholic. He was never really present. And when he was physically there, he seemed to be a million miles away. He spent 5 long years trying to get his attention. 5 years begging for just a few crumbs of affection. When she finally got divorced, she swore she would never be with someone like that again. Her second husband seemed like the complete opposite. Affectionate at first, attentive, present, but little by little, the exact same pattern repeated itself. He started to drift away. He began to prioritize his work. He started to look right through her, as if she were invisible. 2 years later, another divorce. The third husband was chosen with almost obsessive care. Ashley analyzed every detail before committing. He was communicative. He expressed his emotions. He spent quality time with her. Everything seemed different, until it wasn't. 3 years later, there she was again, feeling invisible, begging for attention, repeating the same old dance of pain. The therapist asked a simple question. "Tell me about your father." Ashley was silent for a long moment. "What does my father have to do with my marriages?" "Everything," he said. "Absolutely everything." And it was then that Ashley began to understand something that Jung had discovered over a century ago, something that most people go their entire lives without ever realizing. Jung called it the parental complex. And here's how it works. In your earliest years, your brain creates an internal model of how love works. This model is based on your parents, not on what they said, but on what they did, on what you felt in their presence. If your father was emotionally absent, your brain registered that. Love means absence. Love means chasing. Love means never being enough. This isn't a conscious decision. It's a deep programming that happens before you even have the words to describe what you're feeling. And here's the disturbing part. Your brain doesn't differentiate between what's familiar and what's good. To the unconscious mind, familiar equals safe. Even if it's painful, even if it's destructive, even if it leads you to the same dead end over and over again. Ashley had a sudden realization in that moment. Her father was a man of few words, hardworking, a provider, but emotionally, he was a ghost. She spent her entire childhood trying to get his attention, trying to be good enough, trying to be seen. And that's exactly what she had been doing in her 3 marriages, choosing men who would make her feel invisible, so that she could replay the same old dynamic of trying to win over a love that would never come. But hold on, because this gets even more complex. And what I'm about to explain is the real reason why so many people get trapped in this cycle for decades. Jung identified a phenomenon he called repetition compulsion. The unconscious mind doesn't want you to be happy. The unconscious mind wants you to solve the original problem, and the only way it knows how to solve it is by repeating the situation. Think about it. A part of you is still that child, trying to win the love of a distant father or a hypercritical mother. And every time you enter a relationship, that part of you takes over. It seeks out someone who will recreate the original dynamic, because this time, it believes it will finally achieve a different ending. This time, he will love me. This time, she will accept me. This time, I will be enough. But the problem is, you're trying to solve the problem with the wrong person. Your partner isn't your father. They aren't your mother. The wound that needs to be healed isn't in the current relationship. It's in the childhood you carry deep inside. Let me give you another example. Ethan was 42 years old, and he had a long history of relationships with controlling women. Each girlfriend was more domineering than the last. He felt suffocated, criticized, never good enough. And yet, he kept choosing the same type. His mother was a woman with a very strong personality, opinionated, critical. Nothing Ethan did was ever good enough for her. He spent his entire childhood trying to please a woman who could never be pleased. And in his adult life, he found women who made him feel exactly the same way. Not by accident, but by unconscious design. Jung explained that we carry within us an idealized image of the opposite sex, in men. He called it the anima. In women, the animus. This image is formed primarily by our experience with the parent of the opposite sex. If your mother was critical, your anima carries that imprint, and you will be drawn to critical women. Not because you enjoy being criticized, but because your unconscious mind recognizes that energy as familiar, as home, as love. I know. This can be incredibly disturbing to hear, but it's the truth that most people spend their entire lives running away from. Now, there's a crucial detail that changes everything, and a lot of people misunderstand this about Jung. He wasn't saying that you're doomed to repeat these patterns forever. He was saying that first, you need to recognize the pattern. Only then can you begin to change it. The problem is, most people are blind to their own patterns. They think they're choosing freely, that each relationship is different, that this time it will be different. But look honestly at your history. Look at the people you've chosen. Look at the dynamics that keep repeating. And then ask yourself, what does this have to do with my childhood? The answer might surprise you, Mum, or maybe not. Maybe a part of you already knows. Let me tell you about the concept of transference that Jung developed from Freud's work. Transference is when you project feelings meant for one person onto another person. You meet someone new, and suddenly, you're feeling things that don't make sense for that level of intimacy. You feel disproportionate anger, or an excessive need for approval, or an intense fear of abandonment. These emotions aren't about the person standing right in front of you. They're about the parental figures you've never resolved internally. Your partner becomes a blank canvas, onto which you project your unresolved conflicts, and they do the same to you. The result? A tangled mess of projections, where no one truly sees the other. Each person is battling ghosts from the past. Ashley realized this when she looked at her 3 husbands with new eyes. She wasn't seeing them as they were. She was seeing her father in each of them, and reacting to them as she reacted to her father. When her husband came home tired from work, she interpreted it as rejection. When he needed space, she saw it as abandonment. Every tiny gesture was filtered through the lens of a child, desperate for paternal attention, and her husbands were probably doing the same thing to her, projecting their own parental figures, reacting to their own ghosts. 2 adults in a relationship where both are actually dealing with wounded children inside themselves. This explains why relationships seem so difficult. It's not just compatibility. It's not just communication. It's the weight of generations of unhealed wounds being dumped onto every interaction. But here's the part that fascinates me about Carl Jung's work. He didn't see this as a condemnation. He saw it as an opportunity. Jung believed that the unconscious pushes us into these relationships for a reason. Not just to repeat the suffering, but to give us another chance to heal. Each painful relationship is an invitation to look inward, to recognize the pattern, to finally do the work. That should have been done in childhood, The problem is, most people don't accept the invitation. They blame their partner. They get divorced and look for another. They repeat the cycle without ever stopping to ask, what in me is creating this reality? And that is the most important question you can ask. Not what's wrong with my partners, but what's unresolved in me. That attracts these dynamics. Carl Jung had a phrase that sums this up perfectly. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. You're not having bad luck in love. You're having the exact relationships that your unconscious is creating. And until you look at that unconscious, until you illuminate the shadows that are operating beneath the surface, you're going to keep repeating. But hold on, because now I'm going to explain exactly how these patterns form and why it's so difficult to break them. And this will make you understand why intelligent and conscious people remain trapped in the same painful cycles. In the first 3 years of life, something fundamental happens in your brain. You are completely dependent on your caregivers, not just for physical survival, but for emotional survival. The way they respond to you literally molds the architecture of your brain. If you cried, and someone came with caring and attention, your brain learned, the world is safe, my needs matter, I am worthy of love. But if you cried, and no one came, or someone came with anger, or someone came in an unpredictable way, sometimes with love, sometimes with neglect, your brain learns something completely different. The world is not safe. My needs don't matter. I need to work hard to deserve love. This creates what psychologists call an attachment style. And this style will determine how you behave in all intimate relationships for the rest of your life, unless you do deep work of awareness and healing. Carl Jung didn't use exactly these terms, but he understood the phenomenon. He talked about how the early years create complexes that operate autonomously in the unconscious. These complexes are like little personalities inside you, each with its own logic, its own agenda, its own fears and desires. The maternal complex, the paternal complex. They don't disappear when you grow up. They go into the unconscious and continue operating. And when you meet a potential partner, these complexes wake up. You meet a woman who has something of your mother. Maybe it's the tone of voice, the way she tilts her head, the way she laughs. Something activates the complex. And suddenly, you're no longer seeing that woman as she is. You're seeing your mother. And all the unresolved emotions with your mother come to the surface. The desire for approval, the fear of rejection, the accumulated anger, the need to finally be seen. This happens in millisecond. Before your conscious mind has time to process, your unconscious has already decided. This person is familiar. This person represents an opportunity to resolve what wasn't resolved. And you feel attracted, deeply attracted. You call it chemistry, instant connection, love at first sight, but often, it's just your unconscious recognizing a familiar dynamic. Let me tell you something that will seem counterintuitive. People who had relatively healthy childhoods generally find relationships boring at first. They meet someone gentle, stable, present, and feel that something is missing. The intensity is missing. That missing intensity is the drama, is the emotional roller coaster, is the dynamic of pursuit and escape. It's exactly what people with dysfunctional childhoods confuse with love. If you grew up in emotional chaos, stability feels strange, feels wrong, feels bland. Your nervous system has been calibrated for highs and lows. And when it finds someone who offers consistency, you feel uncomfortable. And that's why so many people reject healthy partners and run into the arms of people who will hurt them. It's not stupidity, it's programming. Ethan realized this when he finally met a different woman. She was gentle, didn't try to control him, accepted him as he was. And he felt completely uncomfortable. Where's the conflict? Where's the drama? Why isn't she criticizing him? Something must be wrong, and it was. But not with her. With the pattern he had internalized. For Ethan, love without conflict wasn't love. It was suspicious. He almost sabotaged that relationship. Luckily, he was in therapy and was able to recognize the pattern in time. But how many people do this without realizing it? How many people destroy healthy relationships because they don't fit the dysfunctional model they learned in childhood? This is what Carl Jung meant when he talked about the shadow. There's a part of you that you don't know, that operates in the dark, that makes decisions for you without your conscious consent. In the choice of partners, the shadow is particularly active. You may consciously want someone loving and present, but your shadow wants someone who will recreate the wound, because the shadow still believes that it can heal the past by repeating it, and the shadow usually wins because it's older, deeper, more persistent. It knows you better than you know yourself. But here's the good news. It's what Carl Jung spent his entire career teaching. The shadow can be integrated. These patterns can be recognized, and once you see clearly what you're doing, you gain choice. The problem is, seeing clearly requires brutal honesty. It demands looking at your history and admitting things you'd rather deny. It demands recognizing that your parents hurt you, even if they loved you, even if they did the best they could. Many people resist this part. They defend their parents, minimize the impact. They say their childhood wasn't that bad, and they keep repeating the same patterns, without understanding why. Carl Jung was clear about this. Until you confront the truth about your childhood, you'll continue living from it. Not in the past and in the present, in every relationship, in every choice, in every disproportionate emotional reaction. The unhealed wound doesn't stay quiet. It screams, it manifests, it finds ways to be seen. And the most common way is through your romantic relationships. Now, I need to explain something about how this works in practice, because understanding the concept is one thing. Seeing it operate in your life is another completely different thing. I'm going to give you an exercise that Carl Jung himself might have created. Grab a piece of paper. Write down the names of all your significant partners. Next to each name, list their main characteristics, the positives and the negatives. Now, look at that list. Search for the patterns. How many of them were emotionally unavailable? How many were critical? How many had difficulty showing affection? How many made you feel like you needed to strive to be loved? Then, write down the characteristics of your parents. Compare the two lists. If you're honest, you'll find chilling overlaps, not in superficial characteristics, but in the deep dynamics, in the way you felt around them, in the position you occupied in the relationship. And that awareness is what starts to break the pattern, not magically, not instantaneously, but with consistency and work. It's possible to reprogram the unconscious. Let me tell you about another mechanism that Jung identified. Projection. Projection is when you attribute to another person characteristics that actually belong to you, or that belong to figures from your past. You meet someone. You immediately feel that this person is cold, distant, difficult to reach. But is she really like that? Or are you projecting onto her the characteristics of your distant father? Projection is one of the main mechanisms that distorts our relationships. You don't see your partner as they are. You see a mixture of what they are with what you project onto them. And often, the projection is stronger than reality. Ashley realized that she projected onto her husband a coldness that wasn't always there. She interpreted tiredness as rejection, silence as contempt, need for space as abandonment, all filtered through the lens of the child who never got her father's attention. And her husband's probably reacted to these projections. When someone treats you as if you were cold and distant, and you tend to become cold and distant, it's a self-fulfilling cycle. This is what Carl Jung called an unconscious relationship. Two unconscious minds interacting, two sets of projections colliding, Two wounded children trying to heal old wounds through each other. The result is almost always disastrous, unless one or both partners wake up to what's happening now. I need to tell you about something that many people don't want to hear. You're not just a victim of these patterns, on some level. You're also an agent of them. This isn't guilt, this is responsibility. There's a huge difference. Guilt says you're defective because you repeat these patterns. Responsibility says you have the power to change them. Carl Jung talked about this when discussing individuation, the process of becoming whole, of integrating the fragmented parts of the psyche, of ceasing to be lived by the complexes and starting to live consciously. Individuation in relationships means recognizing that you're not just seeking love, you're seeking to complete something incomplete in yourself. And as long as you seek that in another, you'll continue to be frustrated. No partner can heal your childhood wound. No relationship can fill the void left by parents who failed to see you. That's internal work, your work. And that doesn't mean you can't have healthy relationships. It means that healthy relationships are a result of internal healing, not a substitute for it. Ashley only started to change when she stopped looking for what was missing in her father and her partner, when she started giving herself the attention she never received, when she learned to validate her own emotions, instead of waiting for someone else to do it for her. It's interesting. When she changed internally, the type of person she attracted also changed. Not because she started to choose better consciously, but because her unconscious no longer needed to recreate the old dynamic. This brings us to a crucial point. Attraction isn't random. It's governed by unconscious forces. And if you change those forces, attraction changes. People who do deep healing work often report that they stopped feeling attracted to the toxic partners of before. What seemed irresistible becomes visibly problematic. The chemistry that once seemed like love is now recognized as trauma-activated. And they start to feel attracted to different people. People who previously seemed boring now seem safe. Stability ceases to be synonymous with boredom and becomes synonymous with peace. This change isn't magic. It's neuroplasticity. It's reconditioning the nervous system that was calibrated for chaos. It takes time. It demands consistency. Absolutely possible. And recognizing yourself. I want you to know something. You're not doomed to repeat your parents' patterns. The fact that you're seeking this kind of content already shows that something in you wants to change. That desire for change is the first step. Carl Jung said that consciousness is healing. Just seeing clearly what's happening already starts to transform. But seeing isn't enough. You need to do the work. You need to look at your childhood with adult eyes. You need to feel the emotions that were repressed. You need to understand how that wounded child is still operating inside of you. And this can be painful. It probably will be. But the alternative is to continue trapped in the same cycle, repeating the same relationships, feeling the same pain, calling what is actually unintegrated unconsciousness destiny. If this video is helping you see your patterns in a different light, then super thanks is a way of saying, this made a difference to me. You've just grasped psychological mechanisms that most people go through life without ever realizing. Every bit of support helps me continue bringing this kind of content that truly transforms lives. Now let me give you something practical. Something you can start doing today to interrupt this cycle of repetition. First, write your childhood story focusing on your parents. What was your mom like? What was your dad like? How did you feel around each of them? What were the main dynamics? What phrases did you hear repeatedly? Don't write for anyone to read. Write for yourself and be brutally honest. That honesty is the foundation of all change. Second, look at your past relationships through this lens. Not to blame your parents, not to play the victim, but to understand. Understanding brings power. Victimization steals power. Third, observe your emotional reactions in your current relationships. When you have a disproportionate reaction, ask yourself, is this about what's happening now? Or is it about something from the past being activated? That pause between stimulus and response is where change happens. It's the space where you can choose differently, where you can stop reacting automatically and start responding consciously. Fourth, consider seeking professional help. A good therapist can enormously accelerate this process, can help you see what would be impossible to see alone, can guide you safely through the layers of the unconscious. Carl Jung said that encountering the unconscious is dangerous without a guide, not because the unconscious is evil, but because it's powerful. And navigating that power requires wisdom, absolutely requires wisdom. Fifth, have patience with yourself. These patterns were formed over years. They won't disappear in weeks. But every moment of awareness weakens the automaticity of the pattern. Every time you recognize the dynamic, you gain a little more freedom. There are 6 signs that you're starting to break the cycle of repetition in relationships. First sign, you can identify the pattern while it's happening, not just in retrospect. You notice in the moment that you're reacting from the past. Second sign, what was once irresistible starts to seem problematic. Toxic people who once attracted you magnetically now trigger alarm bells instead of desire. Major alarm bells. Third sign, stability stops seeming boring. You start to value consistency instead of drama. You start to crave consistency. Fourth sign, you stop trying to change your partner and start working on yourself. The focus shifts from the other person to you. Fifth sign, your emotional reactions become proportional to what's happening. Fewer explosions, fewer catastrophic interpretations, more balance, much more balance. Sixth sign, you can be alone without despair. The compulsive need for a relationship diminishes. You no longer need another person to feel complete. These signs don't appear all at once. They come gradually. As you do the work, as you illuminate the dark parts, as you integrate what was fragmented. Tell me in the comments, have you ever noticed this pattern in your relationships? When was the moment you realized you were repeating something from your childhood? I want to know your experience. I respond to all the comments. Remember, your parents gave you a model of love. That model may have been distorted, dysfunctional, painful, but it's not permanent. You can create a new model. You can learn a new way to love and be loved. You can break the generational cycle that's been repeating, perhaps for many generations. Break it. The child you were had no choice about how they were loved. The adult you are has all the choice about how you will love from now on, and that choice is made every day, in every moment of awareness, every time you refuse to react automatically and choose to respond differently. Carl Jung dedicated his life to studying how the psyche seeks integration and healing. He believed that within each person, there's a natural force pushing toward wholeness. Your painful relationships aren't punishment. They're invitations to this work of integration. A serious invitation. Accept the invitation, do the work, and see how the quality of your relationships completely transforms.